Welcome to Sleepy History Nook. Tonight, we are settling into a quiet house before the easy miracles of switches, warm radiators, soft modern beds, and water that arrives with a twist of the hand. Nothing here needs to hurry. The evening is dim. The room is held by the small orange breath of a hearth, and beyond the door, the world is already giving itself back to night. In our own time, comfort can feel almost invisible. A room brightens. A mattress receives us. A tap fills a glass. A heater hums in the wall. These are small gestures, so ordinary that we may pass through them without noticing. But for most people in most places, such comforts were not background conveniences. They were tasks, materials, skills, habits, and shared routines. Light had to be made. Warmth had to be guarded. Bedding had to be aired, filled, patched, and protected. Water had to be fetched, lifted, heated, poured, carried away, and fetched again. This episode is not a story of misery. People before modern comfort were not simply waiting for us to invent a better life for them. They were practical, observant, and inventive within the limits of their world. They knew how to manage darkness, cold, tired bodies, and household work with the tools they had. Their evenings had textures we can still almost imagine: the scent of smoke in wool, the scrape of a chair on a wooden floor, the soft slap of water in a bucket, the rustle of straw under a coverlet, the careful pinching out of a candle because wax was worth saving. Still, it is worth pausing over how much effort lived inside ordinary comfort. Before electric light, night was not an empty space waiting to be conquered. It was a condition to be negotiated. A household arranged its work around sun, moon, flame, and season. Before warm modern beds, sleep depended on straw, feathers, wool, linen, curtains, quilts, shared warmth, and the steady battle against damp. Before running water, every basin and kettle carried the memory of someone's hands. We will move gently, because these histories are best understood in small motions. Someone trims a wick. Someone shakes out a sheet. Someone warms a pan near the fire. Someone sets a pitcher where it can be found in the dark. None of these acts is grand enough for a monument, and yet together they made the difference between discomfort and rest. As you listen, let the modern room around you become quiet. If there is a lamp beside you, imagine the time when that glow would have required oil, tallow, wax, or careful tending. If your bed is soft beneath you, imagine the older bedstead with ropes, ticking, wool blankets, and perhaps a curtain drawn against drafts. If water is near at hand, imagine the path to the well, the pump, the fountain, or the yard, taken not once but again and again. History often comes to us through kings, battles, inventions, and dates. Tonight, we will let it come through the ordinary evening. We will notice not only what people lacked, but what they knew: how to stretch daylight, how to save fuel, how to keep bedding dry, how to turn a small flame into a circle of safety, and how to make a room feel inhabited even when the night outside was deep. So settle in. Let the pace be slow. We will begin with the world before electric light, when darkness had weight, flame had value, and the end of the day arrived not by a clock alone, but by the fading of the sky. We will keep our attention close to the ground. There will be no need for dramatic disasters or grand complaints. The interest is in the ordinary adjustments, the way a family sits nearer together when there is only one good flame, the way a blanket is pulled over the shoulder before sleep, the way a jug of water is placed where a hand can find it in the morning. These are small histories, but they are honest ones. And perhaps they can make the present feel a little more tender. A switch, a mattress, a faucet, a quiet heater, each is a convenience with ancestors. Each rests on centuries of experiment, labor, trade, fuel, craft, and desire. Tonight we are not leaving the modern world behind because it is bad. We are looking back so that its comforts may become visible again, softened by gratitude, and held lightly enough for sleep. If your own room is comfortable, let that comfort stay with you while we look back. The point is not to make the past seem quaint, or to make the present seem morally superior. It is simply to notice the human work behind rest. Every age has its worries, and every household has its compromises. But in the old evening, comfort was often more visible because it had to be handled directly, flame by flame, blanket by blanket, bucket by bucket. Before electric light, evening did not simply begin when a person decided to relax. It arrived from the sky, across the fields, through the streets, and into the rooms of a house. The change was visible first in corners. Shelves lost their edges. Thread became harder to see. Faces softened into shadow. A person reading, sewing, cooking, counting money, or mending a tool had to notice the light while it was still available, because daylight was the cheapest lamp anyone owned. In a modern room, we often treat light as unlimited. We press a switch and the ceiling answers. Older households thought about light as a material. It had a source, a cost, a smell, a risk, and a lifespan. A candle shortened as it burned. A rushlight guttered. An oil lamp needed filling and trimming. A fire gave light, but not evenly, and its glow was tied to the larger business of heat and fuel. To illuminate a room was to spend something. This meant that daily work followed the sun with an attentiveness many of us have lost. Outdoor labor began early when the season demanded it. Indoor chores that required clear sight were saved for bright hours. Fine sewing, reading, writing, sorting, spinning, and careful cooking were easier near a window. In winter, when daylight was brief, the useful day narrowed. In summer, long evenings could be precious, stretching work and sociability into the soft margins of dusk. Windows mattered, though they were not always large, clear, or plentiful. Glass was expensive in many times and places, and small panes, shutters, oiled cloth, lattice, or open windows each shaped how light entered. A bright room was not only pleasant, it was practical. The placement of a table near a window, the habit of sitting by the door, the turning of a chair toward the afternoon sun, all belonged to a household geography of light. When darkness came, flame made islands rather than oceans. A candle on a table did not make the whole room bright in the way an electric bulb can. It made a small center. Hands, cups, a book, a bowl of broth, a sleeping child, the polished rim of a pewter plate, these appeared. Beyond them, the room withdrew. People lived with a more layered darkness, not total blackness, but a world of near and far, glow and uncertainty. The common candle was often made of tallow, rendered animal fat. Tallow candles were useful, but they could smoke, drip, smell, and soften. Better candles of beeswax burned more cleanly and smelled sweeter, but they cost more. In some households, wax was reserved for church, ceremony, guests, or wealthier rooms. The humble tallow dip was part of ordinary life, trimmed, watched, saved, and sometimes complained about. Rushlights were another economical answer. A rush stem could be peeled, dried, and soaked in fat, then held in a simple iron holder. It gave a modest flame for a modest time. It was not glamorous, but it allowed people of limited means to extend the evening a little. Imagine a narrow strip of light, enough to move about, enough to finish a task, enough to keep company with the dark rather than banish it. Oil lamps had long histories, from ancient clay lamps to later metal and glass designs. The oil might be olive oil, whale oil, seed oil, or other local fuels, depending on period and place. A lamp could be more stable than a candle, but it needed maintenance. The wick had to be managed. The reservoir had to be filled. Smoke and odor depended on fuel and design. Light was not a clean abstraction, it was a small technology in the hand. The hearth was often the largest light in the house. Firelight moved. It brightened a face and then let it go. It threw shadows of chairs and tools along walls. It made iron hooks and pots gleam. In a room centered on the hearth, people gathered not only for warmth but for visibility. The fire was a workplace, a storyteller, a clock, and a companion. Its embers marked the declining evening. Yet firelight was uneven. A person could sit close enough to feel heat on the knees while the back of the room remained dim. Tasks requiring precision might be frustrating by flame alone. Eyes strained. Mistakes happened. Needles pricked fingers. Letters blurred. It is easy to romanticize candlelit rooms, and they can be beautiful, but they were also rooms where people knew the limits of seeing. Because light cost money and labor, households developed habits of economy. A candle might be lit only when needed. Wicks were snuffed to keep the flame clean. Stubs were saved. Grease and fat could be rendered for future use. Lamps were not left burning casually in empty rooms. The phrase, burning daylight, once had a practical cousin, burning candle, burning oil, burning fuel that would have to be replaced. Social life adjusted itself to this economy. Families gathered around one source of light rather than scattering across separate rooms. A single candle could serve several people if they sat close. One person might read aloud while others sewed, carved, listened, or simply rested. The pool of light encouraged shared attention. Privacy existed, of course, but darkness and cost made solitude by artificial light less casual than it is now. Night travel also felt different. Streets without electric lamps could be very dark, though cities sometimes used lanterns, watchmen, oil lamps, or moonlight. The quality of public lighting varied greatly. Wealthier districts might be better lit than poorer lanes. A traveler might carry a lantern, hire a link boy with a torch, or time a journey by the moon. Mud, stones, animals, steps, and strangers all became more significant after sunset. The moon was part of practical planning. A bright moon could extend movement outdoors. Farmers, travelers, and townspeople noticed its phases. Snow could amplify night brightness. Clouds could erase it. Before electric light washed the sky, celestial light was more present in ordinary awareness. Stars were not merely decorative, they belonged to navigation, weather sense, religious imagination, and the emotional texture of night. Indoors, bedtime often came earlier for those without reason or means to keep lamps burning. This did not mean everyone slept straight through from dusk until dawn. Sleep patterns varied, and historians have discussed evidence for segmented sleep in some early modern European contexts, with a period of wakefulness between first and second sleep. But whatever the pattern, darkness shaped the possibilities. It made some activities harder and others more natural. Children learned the rules of flame. Do not knock the candle. Do not lean too close. Do not waste the light. Carry the lamp carefully. Keep cloth away. These instructions were not fussy household manners, they were fire prevention. In crowded wooden buildings, with straw, textiles, paper, and open flame, carelessness could be disastrous. A calm evening depended on repeated caution. In workshops, light governed labor. A cobbler, printer, weaver, milliner, or clerk needed enough illumination to work well. Some trades used windows, courtyards, skylights, or carefully placed benches. In darker months, productivity could change. Candles and lamps could extend labor, but at a cost. The industrial age did not only mechanize work, it also sought to brighten it, first with improved lamps and gaslight, later with electricity. Gas lighting, before widespread electric lighting, transformed many urban spaces in the 19th century. Streets, theaters, shops, and some homes became brighter and more predictable. But gas had its own costs, smells, dangers, and infrastructure. It did not arrive everywhere at once, and many rural households continued with older methods. The history of light is uneven, moving by class, geography, technology, and price. For the ordinary home before electricity, the evening meal might be arranged around fading light. Cooking often continued by hearth or stove, where flame already existed. The table might be set while there was still enough daylight to see. Once lamps were lit, conversation slowed into the small circle they made. Faces leaned inward. A spoon touched a bowl. The room beyond the table became less important. Reading by candlelight carries a special place in our imagination, but it was not always easy or common. Books themselves were expensive for much of history, and literacy varied. Where reading did occur, good light mattered. A person might hold a book close, angle it toward the flame, or stop when the eyes tired. The modern habit of reading late into the night under a steady bedside lamp is a relatively recent comfort. Needlework by dim light was especially demanding. Mending, hemming, darning stockings, marking linen, and making garments often belonged to women's work, though not exclusively. The work could not simply wait forever, yet poor light made it tiring. Imagine white thread in dusk, dark wool near a smoky lamp, the careful search for a dropped needle on a floor that has already become shadow. Religious and seasonal rituals often used light with deliberate meaning because light was precious. Candles in churches, lamps in festivals, lanterns in processions, hearth fires before the warm modern bed, sleep began long before anyone lay down. A bed was not a sealed object bought once and forgotten. It was a collection of materials that needed attention: frame, rope, sacking, straw, wool, feathers, linen, blankets, coverlets, curtains, and sometimes a hot brick or warming pan. Comfort was assembled, shaken, aired, beaten, tucked, repaired, and defended against damp. The modern mattress hides its engineering. Springs, foam, stitched covers, standard sizes, and washable sheets make the bed seem simple. Older beds were more obviously made of the living world. Straw came from fields. Feathers came from birds. Wool came from sheep. Linen came from flax. Wood came from trees. A bed carried the farm, the workshop, the laundry, and the season into the sleeping room. For many people, the simplest bedding was straw or hay inside a tick, a sturdy cloth case. The tick could be emptied and refilled when the contents became broken, dusty, or unpleasant. Fresh straw had a dry, grassy smell. It rustled under the body. It could be lumpy or surprisingly comfortable depending on quality and care. The phrase, "hit the hay," preserves a memory of bedding as an agricultural material. Rope beds were common in many places. A wooden frame might be laced with rope to support the mattress. Over time the ropes could slacken, making the bed sag. Tightening them restored firmness, which may be connected to the old farewell, "sleep tight," though the exact history of the phrase is debated. What matters for our purposes is the physical fact: a bed required maintenance to remain supportive. Feather beds were prized where available. They could be soft, warm, and enveloping, especially in cold rooms. But feathers had to be contained in good ticking, protected from moisture, and occasionally aired. They could flatten or shift. Down and feathers represented wealth, household management, and accumulated resources. A fine feather bed was not merely furniture, it was stored comfort. Wool mattresses, flock beds, chaff beds, and other fillings varied by region and class. Some people slept on pallets on the floor. Some shared beds with siblings, servants, or spouses. Some travelers slept in inns where beds might be shared with strangers, a thought that feels startling now but belonged to older economies of space and heat. Privacy in sleep was not distributed evenly. Warmth was one of the central problems. Bedrooms were often unheated or only lightly warmed. The hearth might be in the main room, not the sleeping chamber. A fire in a bedroom required fuel, ventilation, and care. Many people went to bed in rooms where the air was cold enough to make breath visible. The bed had to become a small climate of its own. Bed curtains helped create that climate. In wealthier homes, four-poster beds with hangings were not only decorative. Curtains reduced drafts, held warmth, and created privacy in shared or multipurpose rooms. Heavy textiles around a bed could make a chamber within a chamber. To draw the curtains was to close a soft wall against the night. Blankets and coverlets carried both comfort and labor. Wool blankets were warm even in damp conditions, but they were heavy and required cleaning and airing. Quilts and coverlets could be practical, decorative, and sentimental. Layers mattered. A sleeper might feel the weight of bedding as reassurance, the body held down gently against cold air. Linen sheets were valued for cleanliness and status. Clean sheets were not casual in a world where laundry required hauling water, heating it, rubbing, rinsing, wringing, and drying. A freshly made bed represented hours of work, often by women or servants. The cool touch of linen at night contained someone else's labor, even when the sleeper did not think of it. Damp was an enemy of sleep. Houses without modern insulation, central heating, or vapor barriers could be cold and moist. Bedding needed airing in sun or near warmth when possible. Mattresses and blankets stored the weather. A bed left neglected could feel clammy. To prepare a bed was partly to persuade it to be dry. The warming pan is one of the most memorable tools of the older bed. A metal pan with a lid, filled with hot coals or embers and moved between the sheets, could take the chill off before someone climbed in. Used carefully, it made a cold bed welcoming. Used carelessly, it could scorch cloth or worse. Comfort and danger often sat close together in the age of open fire. Hot bricks, stones, bottles, or later rubber hot water bottles served similar purposes. Wrapped in cloth, they warmed the foot of the bed. Feet matter greatly in the history of comfort. Cold feet can keep the whole body alert. A small stored heat near the toes could make sleep arrive more kindly. Nightclothes also belonged to warmth. Shifts, shirts, caps, stockings, and bed jackets helped protect the body in cold rooms. A nightcap was not only quaint, the head loses heat, and covering it made sense. People did not always undress into the light garments we imagine now. Sleepwear adapted to drafts, fuel costs, modesty, and household arrangements. Sharing a bed could be practical warmth. Families with limited space and fuel often slept close. Children might share. Servants might share. Married couples shared not only affection but heat. Modern ideals of individual beds and private bedrooms developed unevenly and often depended on wealth, architecture, and changing ideas about hygiene and privacy. The bed was also a place of illness, birth, recovery, conversation, and sometimes work. In one-room or two-room dwellings, the sleeping place was part of daily life. In grand houses, the bed could be a display object, with costly hangings and carved posts. Across classes, however, the bed remained intimate, the place where the body met the household's best attempt at rest. Making the bed could be a substantial task. Straw might be redistributed. A feather bed might be shaken. Sheets were smoothed. Blankets were layered. Curtains were checked. In the morning, bedding might be turned back to air. These routines were not decorative fuss. They kept the sleeping place usable, dry, and decent. Vermin and insects were part of the less pleasant reality, but we can mention them gently. Fleas, lice, and bedbugs troubled many households at different times. Cleanliness, airing, herbs, smoke, shaking, and laundering were among the defenses, with varying success. A comfortable bed required vigilance. The past was not uniformly filthy, but neither was it sealed from the small creatures that shared human dwellings. Season changed the bed. In winter, extra blankets appeared, curtains were drawn tight, and warming tools became precious. In summer, heavy coverings were reduced, windows opened when safe, and people sought air. Bedding was seasonal equipment. A household that could store extra layers possessed a kind of security. Class differences were profound. A wealthy person might sleep in a carved bedstead with curtains, feather mattress, fine linen, and servants to warm and make the bed. A poor laborer might sleep on straw, a pallet, a bench, or shared bedding in a crowded room. Yet both knew the importance of dryness, warmth, and a place to let the body stop working. Travel made beds uncertain. Inns varied widely. A traveler might bring a blanket or cloak, inspect the bed, bargain for better bedding, or sleep in clothing. The familiar modern expectation of a private, standardized hotel bed is quite new. Older travel involved trusting the bedding of others, with all the discomfort and sociability that implies. The rise of metal bed frames, improved mattresses, cotton textiles, manufactured blankets, and eventually central heating changed sleep slowly. Comfort did not arrive in one invention. It accumulated. Better roads and trade moved materials. Industrial spinning and weaving lowered some textile costs. Public health ideas encouraged cleanliness. New fuels and heating systems warmed rooms more evenly. The modern warm bed is therefore a bundle of histories. It contains agriculture, animal keeping, textile production, domestic service, fuel, architecture, hygiene, industry, and changing expectations of privacy. When you lie down now, supported by a mattress that asks almost nothing of you, you are resting on centuries of small improvements. But the older bed had its own rituals of care. Someone might carry a warming pan from the hearth, test it with caution, and slide it slowly beneath the covers. Someone might tuck a child under wool and whisper that the cold will fade soon. Someone might draw bed curtains and hear the room become smaller and safer. The bed was not warm at first touch, it became warm through patience. Imagine that moment. The candle is low. The floor is cold. The sheets hold a little chill. You climb in carefully, pulling layers close around the shoulders. At first the body notices every cool place. Then breath settles. The straw or feathers yield. The blankets gather heat. Outside the curtains or beyond the bed's edge, the room remains winter, but inside, a small weather changes. This is the quiet lesson of beds before modern warmth. Comfort was not automatic, yet it was deeply desired and carefully made. People did not need perfect conditions to find rest. They needed materials, skill, routine, and sometimes another human being's kindness. A warmed bed was a promise that the day had ended and the body could be trusted to sleep. Before the warm modern bed, sleep began long before anyone lay down. A bed was not a sealed object bought once and forgotten. It was a collection of materials that needed attention: frame, rope, sacking, straw, wool, feathers, linen, blankets, coverlets, curtains, and sometimes a hot brick or warming pan. Comfort was assembled, shaken, aired, beaten, tucked, repaired, and defended against damp. The modern mattress hides its engineering. Springs, foam, stitched covers, standard sizes, and washable sheets make the bed seem simple. Older beds were more obviously made of the living world. Straw came from fields. Feathers came from birds. Wool came from sheep. Linen came from flax. Wood came from trees. A bed carried the farm, the workshop, the laundry, and the season into the sleeping room. For many people, the simplest bedding was straw or hay inside a tick, a sturdy cloth case. The tick could be emptied and refilled when the contents became broken, dusty, or unpleasant. Fresh straw had a dry, grassy smell. It rustled under the body. It could be lumpy or surprisingly comfortable depending on quality and care. The phrase, "hit the hay," preserves a memory of bedding as an agricultural material. Rope beds were common in many places. A wooden frame might be laced with rope to support the mattress. Over time the ropes could slacken, making the bed sag. Tightening them restored firmness, which may be connected to the old farewell, "sleep tight," though the exact history of the phrase is debated. What matters for our purposes is the physical fact: a bed required maintenance to remain supportive. Feather beds were prized where available. They could be soft, warm, and enveloping, especially in cold rooms. But feathers had to be contained in good ticking, protected from moisture, and occasionally aired. They could flatten or shift. Down and feathers represented wealth, household management, and accumulated resources. A fine feather bed was not merely furniture, it was stored comfort. Wool mattresses, flock beds, chaff beds, and other fillings varied by region and class. Some people slept on pallets on the floor. Some shared beds with siblings, servants, or spouses. Some travelers slept in inns where beds might be shared with strangers, a thought that feels startling now but belonged to older economies of space and heat. Privacy in sleep was not distributed evenly. Warmth was one of the central problems. Bedrooms were often unheated or only lightly warmed. The hearth might be in the main room, not the sleeping chamber. A fire in a bedroom required fuel, ventilation, and care. Many people went to bed in rooms where the air was cold enough to make breath visible. The bed had to become a small climate of its own. Bed curtains helped create that climate. In wealthier homes, four-poster beds with hangings were not only decorative. Curtains reduced drafts, held warmth, and created privacy in shared or multipurpose rooms. Heavy textiles around a bed could make a chamber within a chamber. To draw the curtains was to close a soft wall against the night. Blankets and coverlets carried both comfort and labor. Wool blankets were warm even in damp conditions, but they were heavy and required cleaning and airing. Quilts and coverlets could be practical, decorative, and sentimental. Layers mattered. A sleeper might feel the weight of bedding as reassurance, the body held down gently against cold air. Linen sheets were valued for cleanliness and status. Clean sheets were not casual in a world where laundry required hauling water, heating it, rubbing, rinsing, wringing, and drying. A freshly made bed represented hours of work, often by women or servants. The cool touch of linen at night contained someone else's labor, even when the sleeper did not think of it. Damp was an enemy of sleep. Houses without modern insulation, central heating, or vapor barriers could be cold and moist. Bedding needed airing in sun or near warmth when possible. Mattresses and blankets stored the weather. A bed left neglected could feel clammy. To prepare a bed was partly to persuade it to be dry. The warming pan is one of the most memorable tools of the older bed. A metal pan with a lid, filled with hot coals or embers and moved between the sheets, could take the chill off before someone climbed in. Used carefully, it made a cold bed welcoming. Used carelessly, it could scorch cloth or worse. Comfort and danger often sat close together in the age of open fire. Hot bricks, stones, bottles, or later rubber hot water bottles served similar purposes. Wrapped in cloth, they warmed the foot of the bed. Feet matter greatly in the history of comfort. Cold feet can keep the whole body alert. A small stored heat near the toes could make sleep arrive more kindly. Nightclothes also belonged to warmth. Shifts, shirts, caps, stockings, and bed jackets helped protect the body in cold rooms. A nightcap was not only quaint, the head loses heat, and covering it made sense. People did not always undress into the light garments we imagine now. Sleepwear adapted to drafts, fuel costs, modesty, and household arrangements. Sharing a bed could be practical warmth. Families with limited space and fuel often slept close. Children might share. Servants might share. Married couples shared not only affection but heat. Modern ideals of individual beds and private bedrooms developed unevenly and often depended on wealth, architecture, and changing ideas about hygiene and privacy. The bed was also a place of illness, birth, recovery, conversation, and sometimes work. In one-room or two-room dwellings, the sleeping place was part of daily life. In grand houses, the bed could be a display object, with costly hangings and carved posts. Across classes, however, the bed remained intimate, the place where the body met the household's best attempt at rest. Making the bed could be a substantial task. Straw might be redistributed. A feather bed might be shaken. Sheets were smoothed. Blankets were layered. Curtains were checked. In the morning, bedding might be turned back to air. These routines were not decorative fuss. They kept the sleeping place usable, dry, and decent. Vermin and insects were part of the less pleasant reality, but we can mention them gently. Fleas, lice, and bedbugs troubled many households at different times. Cleanliness, airing, herbs, smoke, shaking, and laundering were among the defenses, with varying success. A comfortable bed required vigilance. The past was not uniformly filthy, but neither was it sealed from the small creatures that shared human dwellings. Season changed the bed. In winter, extra blankets appeared, curtains were drawn tight, and warming tools became precious. In summer, heavy coverings were reduced, windows opened when safe, and people sought air. Bedding was seasonal equipment. A household that could store extra layers possessed a kind of security. Class differences were profound. A wealthy person might sleep in a carved bedstead with curtains, feather mattress, fine linen, and servants to warm and make the bed. A poor laborer might sleep on straw, a pallet, a bench, or shared bedding in a crowded room. Yet both knew the importance of dryness, warmth, and a place to let the body stop working. Travel made beds uncertain. Inns varied widely. A traveler might bring a blanket or cloak, inspect the bed, bargain for better bedding, or sleep in clothing. The familiar modern expectation of a private, standardized hotel bed is quite new. Older travel involved trusting the bedding of others, with all the discomfort and sociability that implies. The rise of metal bed frames, improved mattresses, cotton textiles, manufactured blankets, and eventually central heating changed sleep slowly. Comfort did not arrive in one invention. It accumulated. Better roads and trade moved materials. Industrial spinning and weaving lowered some textile costs. Public health ideas encouraged cleanliness. New fuels and heating systems warmed rooms more evenly. The modern warm bed is therefore a bundle of histories. It contains agriculture, animal keeping, textile production, domestic service, fuel, architecture, hygiene, industry, and changing expectations of privacy. When you lie down now, supported by a mattress that asks almost nothing of you, you are resting on centuries of small improvements. But the older bed had its own rituals of care. Someone might carry a warming pan from the hearth, test it with caution, and slide it slowly beneath the covers. Someone might tuck a child under wool and whisper that the cold will fade soon. Someone might draw bed curtains and hear the room become smaller and safer. The bed was not warm at first touch, it became warm through patience. Imagine that moment. The candle is low. The floor is cold. The sheets hold a little chill. You climb in carefully, pulling layers close around the shoulders. At first the body notices every cool place. Then breath settles. The straw or feathers yield. The blankets gather heat. Outside the curtains or beyond the bed's edge, the room remains winter, but inside, a small weather changes. This is the quiet lesson of beds before modern warmth. Comfort was not automatic, yet it was deeply desired and carefully made. People did not need perfect conditions to find rest. They needed materials, skill, routine, and sometimes another human being's kindness. A warmed bed was a promise that the day had ended and the body could be trusted to sleep. The bedsteads themselves could be valuable possessions. In wills and inventories, beds often appear with careful descriptions because they represented wealth. A bed with its hangings, mattresses, bolsters, pillows, blankets, and coverlets might be among a household's most important goods. To inherit bedding was to inherit comfort, fabric, warmth, and status all at once. Pillows and bolsters varied as much as mattresses did. Some were filled with feathers, some with flock or other materials, and some were smaller or firmer than modern pillows. The expectation of how the head should rest has changed over time. In some periods, people slept more propped up than many of us do now, whether from habit, clothing, health beliefs, or the shape of available bedding. The bedchamber was not always a private room devoted only to sleep. In many homes, space was too limited for that. A bed might stand in a corner of a main room, behind a curtain, in a loft, or in a shared chamber. People dressed, stored goods, nursed children, received visitors, or did small tasks near sleeping places. The modern bedroom, quiet and specialized, developed unevenly. Airing bedding was one of the great quiet arts. Sunlight, wind, and dry weather were allies. A blanket hung over a line, a mattress turned, sheets spread near warmth, pillows shaken at a window. These gestures kept the bed from becoming stale. The smell of sun in cloth was not sentimental only. It was practical relief from damp and enclosed air. Laundry connected the bed to water and fuel. Sheets were large, heavy when wet, and slow to dry. In cold or rainy weather, drying could be difficult. A household might change linen less often than modern standards suggest, not from indifference, but because washing represented a major event. Clean bedding was a comfort measured in buckets, soap, fire, weather, and time. Beds for infants and children had their own practices. Cradles, trundle beds, shared pallets, and small nests of blankets kept young bodies near warmth and care. A child might sleep close to parents in a cold house, not only from affection but from necessity. Night care was easier when a cough, cry, or restless movement could be heard in the same room. The sounds of an older bed were different. Ropes creaked. Straw rustled. Curtains shifted. Floorboards answered footsteps. A feather bed sighed when someone turned. These sounds could be annoying or comforting, depending on fatigue and familiarity. Sleep was surrounded by the audible materials of the household. Smell belonged to bedding as well. Fresh straw, wool, linen dried outdoors, smoke from the hearth, lavender or other herbs tucked among cloth, human warmth, and sometimes the less pleasant odors of damp or crowding all mingled. The modern bed often aims to smell of nothing but detergent. Older beds carried more of the world. The making of quilts and coverlets could hold memory. Fabric scraps, patterned weaving, stitched layers, and household handiwork turned warmth into an object of care. A quilt might be practical first, beautiful second, or both at once. Its weight at night could include the time of the hands that made it. Servants, where present, often performed the most intimate labor of comfort. They warmed beds, shook mattresses, changed linen, carried water, laid fires, opened shutters, and dealt with the less pleasant chores. A grand bedchamber could look serene because other people moved through it before and after the sleeper. Comfort often has this hidden structure. For those without servants, the labor remained within the family. Mothers, daughters, sons, apprentices, and lodgers all might help according to custom and necessity. The bed was a shared household project even when only one person slept in it. Someone had to gather, wash, mend, air, and arrange. Cold rooms encouraged certain bedtime rituals. People undressed quickly or partially, warmed hands near the fire first, carried a candle carefully, and slipped beneath covers before body heat escaped. Some kept clothing near the bed to make morning bearable. Rising could be the hardest part, when the little warmth created overnight had to be abandoned. Morning revealed the bed's work. Blankets held the shape of sleep. The air outside the covers might still be sharp. A person might delay a moment, listening for movement in the house, waiting for the fire to be stirred or daylight to grow. The bed was a refuge, but not a permanent one. Work pulled people out of warmth. Changing technology altered not only comfort but posture and expectation. Sprung mattresses, slatted supports, iron and brass frames, cotton sheets, and manufactured quilts gradually changed how beds felt and how easily they could be cleaned. Metal frames could discourage some pests compared with wooden crevices, though no solution was perfect. Each improvement adjusted the nightly bargain. Central heating made perhaps the deepest emotional change. When the room itself became warm, the bed no longer had to do all the work of making a climate. Sheets could feel inviting at once. Getting up became less severe. Children could sleep in separate rooms more comfortably. Privacy expanded when heat did not require everyone to cluster near the same source. Yet even now, we keep traces of older habits. We tuck blankets around ourselves. We warm cold feet. We value fresh sheets. We turn pillows to the cool side. We speak of being tucked in, of nesting, of burrowing under covers. The ancient wish is still there, to make a small safe weather for the sleeping body. Mattress care also involved judgment. Straw that had grown sour or crushed could be replaced. Feathers could be redistributed by patient shaking and beating. Wool could mat if neglected. A good housekeeper, servant, or careful sleeper knew when a bed had lost its loft, when a seam needed mending, when damp had crept in, and when fresh air would do more good than another cover. The bed had a condition, almost like a small domestic weather report. In some rural households, the timing of bedding renewal followed harvest and animal cycles. Fresh straw was more available after grain was cut. Wool depended on sheep and shearing, then washing, carding, spinning, weaving, or stuffing. Feathers accumulated slowly, often saved over time. These rhythms meant that sleep was tied to the wider calendar. A winter bed began in summer fields and spring barns long before the first frost entered the room. There were cultural differences, too. Not everyone slept in the same kind of bed, or even on what a modern Western listener would immediately call a bed. Mats, platforms, hammocks, quilts laid on floors, raised bedsteads, sleeping benches, and built-in box beds all belonged to different places and needs. Climate mattered. In warmer regions, airflow could be more important than heavy insulation. In colder damp regions, enclosure and layers mattered more. The warm modern bed is not the only answer humans have made to the question of sleep. Box beds and enclosed beds, found in parts of Europe, show how architecture and bedding could merge. Built into walls or furniture, sometimes closed with doors or curtains, they conserved warmth and offered privacy in crowded interiors. To modern eyes they may seem confining, but in a cold house they could feel secure. They made the bed into a cupboard of warmth, a wooden nest against drafts. The emotional meaning of a good bed should not be underestimated. After a day of field labor, washing, market work, child care, cooking, hauling, or craft, the body wanted more than a place to collapse. It wanted relief from hardness, cold, and exposure. A well-kept bed said that the household had managed, at least for tonight, to set aside a pocket of care. Even a modest pallet could carry that meaning if it was dry, familiar, and one's own. So when we speak of life before warm modern beds, we are speaking about both limitation and tenderness. We are speaking about the chill of sheets, yes, but also about the hands that warmed them. We are speaking about heavy blankets, shared breath, curtains drawn, straw shaken level, and the small bravery of leaving the fire for a cold chamber. Sleep came not because the room was perfect, but because people made a place where the body could finally stop guarding itself. Now we come to water, the comfort most easily forgotten because it is so obedient in a modern room. A tap turns, and water appears, clean enough for ordinary use, pressurized enough to fill a glass, patient enough to wait all night inside the wall. A second movement of the hand may bring hot water, or at least water warming steadily toward comfort. We wash, rinse, soak, flush, fill, and drain with hardly a thought for the distance between source and sink. Before running water became ordinary, that distance was not hidden. It was part of the day. Water had weight. Water had weather. Water had a path across a yard, down a lane, through a scullery, over a threshold, up a stair, or into a wash-house. Every cup of tea, every basin beside a bed, every pot set over the fire, every sheet rinsed and wrung out, began with someone arranging for water to be there. This is one of the gentlest ways to understand older domestic life. Not by imagining it as grim or filthy, because that would be too simple, and often wrong. People in many times and places cared about cleanliness, fresh linen, orderly houses, sweet-smelling rooms, clean hands, and clear drinking water. But the work behind those things was more visible, more physical, and more unevenly shared. Comfort did not arrive through pipes. It arrived by bucket, jug, barrel, pump, ladle, kettle, and hand. The source might be close, or it might be far enough to matter. A farmhouse might have a well in the yard, lined with stone or brick, covered carefully to keep out leaves and animals. A village might gather around a communal well, where neighbors met in the morning and news moved almost as readily as water. A town might have a pump in a street, or a fountain fed by a conduit, or a public spout where people queued with pails. In some places there were springs with reputations for sweetness or healing. In others, rainwater was caught from roofs and stored in cisterns, valued especially where wells were brackish, deep, or unreliable. None of these arrangements belongs to one neat century. History does not move in a straight line from bucket to bathroom. Ancient cities had aqueducts and drains. Medieval towns could have conduits and public fountains. Early modern households might use wells, pumps, cisterns, and servants. 19th-century cities slowly built water mains, but many houses still depended on yard pumps or shared taps. In rural districts, hand-carried water could remain normal long after urban neighborhoods began to receive piped supplies. Even within the same town, one family might enjoy a pipe in the kitchen while another crossed a courtyard to a pump, and another paid a water carrier. So when we say before running water, we are speaking of an uneven condition rather than a single date. For some, it means a cottage before a village standpipe. For others, a city tenement with a tap on a landing but none inside the room. For others, a great house where water was drawn, heated, and carried by servants so smoothly that the family upstairs did not feel the full weight of it. The absence of running water was not experienced equally. It depended on geography, climate, income, household size, local infrastructure, and the bodies available to do the work. A full bucket is heavy. That small fact shaped the world. A wooden or metal pail filled with water might weigh enough that a child learned quickly to walk slowly, to keep the arms slightly away from the body, to balance the load, to avoid sloshing precious effort onto the ground. 2 buckets on a yoke could distribute the burden across shoulders, but they also made the carrier wider, more deliberate, more aware of doorways, stones, mud, and ice. In winter, the handle might sting the fingers. In summer, the work might be repeated under a hot sun. At dusk, the path back from the well could feel longer than it was. Water carrying made its own sounds. The creak of a pump handle. The hollow knock of a bucket against stone. The soft slap of water inside a pail. The careful step of someone entering a kitchen without spilling. In a quiet house, these sounds were part of the machinery of living, as regular as the fire being stirred or the shutters being closed. The well itself could be a place of care and caution. Wells had to be sited, dug, lined, covered, repaired, and protected. A good well was valuable property. People watched the level in dry weather. They noticed changes in taste or smell. They worried, with good reason, about contamination, even when they did not understand germs in the modern scientific way. Long before bacteriology was explained in household manuals, people knew that some water was wholesome and some was suspect. They could observe illness following bad water, or prefer a spring that ran clear over a pond that stood warm and green. In many regions, the first draw of the morning was a familiar task. Someone stepped outside with the pail while the household was still only partly awake. The air might smell of damp earth, smoke, animals, and bread beginning. The rope lowered into the darkness, or the pump handle moved up and down with a steady, muscular rhythm. The bucket came back shining at the rim, cold enough to bead in warmer air. That water might be for drinking, for porridge, for tea, for washing faces, for rinsing a pot, for mixing dough, for animals waiting in a stall. Inside the house, water lived in containers. This is a quiet but important difference. Instead of being everywhere at once, available at fixed points in wall and floor, it was held, stored, carried, watched, and portioned. There were buckets near the door, jugs on shelves, barrels in yards, cisterns under roofs, crocks in cool corners, kettles near the hearth, basins on washstands, tubs brought out for particular tasks, and ewers with curved handles for pouring. The household was a small landscape of vessels. A ewer and basin in a bedroom could look elegant in porcelain, plain in earthenware, or practical in metal. On a washstand, the arrangement seems simple: a pitcher, a bowl, perhaps a soap dish, a cloth, a towel, maybe a small covered slop jar nearby. But each part of that quiet scene represents labor already done. The pitcher had to be filled. If warm water was desired, it had to be heated downstairs and carried up before it cooled. The basin, once used, had to be emptied. The towel had to be laundered. The soap had to be bought or made. A bedroom wash was private, but it was not independent. For an ordinary evening wash, only a little water might be used. Hands, face, neck, perhaps feet, depending on season, occupation, and custom. The person washing would pour carefully, not as we do beneath a running stream, but in small amounts, enough to wet a cloth, enough to rinse fingers, enough to feel refreshed before bed. Water in a basin soon changed temperature. In winter it could be bracingly cold unless warmed. In a candlelit room, the surface caught the flame as a trembling oval, and the sound of washing was modest: a small pour, a cloth squeezed, a few drops returning to the bowl. Heating water added another chain of work. Fuel had to be gathered, bought, chopped, stored, and burned. A kettle did not simply become hot because one wished it. It had to be placed where the fire could do its slow work. A pot of water might stand on a trivet, hang from a crane, or sit on a range. In households with coal ranges, kitchen work had its own timing in soot. In households with wood fires, heat depended on what had been cut and carried. Hot water was comfort, but it was also fuel transformed into tenderness. Because hot water cost effort, it was used with judgment. A little might be saved for shaving, for a baby's wash, for an invalid, for a person returning chilled from outdoor work, for dishes greasy from supper, for steeping herbs, for laundry that needed more than cold rinsing. A full hot bath at home required a small campaign. Water had to be fetched, heated in batches, carried to a tub, poured in, perhaps carried upstairs, then taken away when finished. By the time enough water was ready, the first kettleful might already be cooling. This does not mean people never bathed. It means bathing took different forms. Public bathhouses existed in some societies and periods. Steam baths, sweat baths, river bathing, medicinal bathing, and communal washing all have long histories. In other contexts, people washed by parts, face and hands daily, feet when needed, hair on particular days, body with a cloth and basin. Clean linen was often considered essential, because linen next to the skin absorbed sweat and could be changed and washed more easily than the whole body could be immersed. A clean shirt could feel like a kind of bath. It is worth lingering over that point, because modern imagination often makes the past too flat. People before modern plumbing were not all careless about their bodies. They noticed dirt. They disliked bad smells. They developed customs of grooming, airing, laundering, brushing, wiping, perfuming, and changing garments. But they worked within limits of water, fuel, soap, privacy, climate, and time. Cleanliness was not absent. It was negotiated. Hands mattered especially. Hands prepared food, tended children, nursed the sick, milked animals, handled tools, garden soil, ink, wool, flour, fish, and firewood. Washing hands before meals or after certain work could be a habit of respect as well as health. In some households, a servant might bring water before dining. In humbler rooms, a basin might be passed or placed near the door. In religious communities, ritual washing gave water spiritual as well as practical meaning. The ordinary basin was sometimes part of a larger moral world: order, discipline, hospitality, decency. The kitchen was another center of water. Cooking required it constantly, but rarely casually. Soups, porridges, stews, bread, tea, beer, coffee, and preserves all called for water in different ways. Pots had to be filled and scrubbed. Vegetables rinsed. Cloths dampened. Floors mopped or sprinkled. Milk pans cleaned. Bottles scalded. If a household brewed small beer or made cider, if it kept animals, if it preserved food in crocks or jars, the demand multiplied. A kitchen without running water was never simply dry. It was wet with handled water, managed water, water arriving and leaving by human effort. In many older homes, water and fire were close companions. The kettle near the hearth was not merely a utensil, but a promise. It meant tea could be made, cloth could be warmed, a compress prepared, a basin softened. In a sick room, the availability of clean water might be watched carefully. Someone with fever might need drinks, cloths, cooling, washing, rinsing of cups and linens. Illness made the labor of water more urgent and more tender. A night nurse, whether paid, related, or simply devoted, might spend long hours moving between bed, basin, kettle, and doorway. For babies and small children, water shaped care in countless small ways. A baby needed washing, cloths rinsed, feeding vessels cleaned, bedding changed. A child asking for a drink in the night depended on an adult having brought water close enough. A basin at dawn could wash sleep from a face before school or field work. Muddy feet had to be dealt with before blankets were spoiled. The coziness of a clean child in a nightshirt often rested on someone else's repeated trips to the pump. Laundry was perhaps the greatest hidden labor connected to water. It is difficult to overstate how large this work could be. Washing clothes and household linen before modern machines was not simply putting garments into water. It meant sorting, soaking, heating, soaping, rubbing, pounding, boiling, rinsing, bluing, starching, wringing, carrying, hanging, drying, mangling, ironing, folding, and putting away. Each verb had tools and techniques attached to it. Each step required water, and often more water than a household wished to carry. A wash day might begin before sunrise. Water was fetched or pumped into tubs and boilers. Fires were made up. Heavy linens were soaked. Soap might be shaved or soft soap stirred in. Some fabrics were rubbed by hand against a board, some beaten, some boiled in a copper, some treated more gently. The air in a washhouse could become humid, smoky, and sharp with soap or lye. Arms reddened. Backs bent. Steam clouded windows. Floors grew slick. In cold weather, fingers numbed during rinsing. In warm weather, the heat around the copper could be exhausting. Rinsing demanded its own supply. Soap left in cloth could irritate skin and stiffen fabric, so clean water was needed again and again. Then came wringing, one of the hard labors of the body. Wet cloth is astonishingly heavy. Sheets, shirts, petticoats, towels, diapers, work clothes, and table linen all held water stubbornly. Before mechanical wringers were common, hands twisted until wrists ached. Later wringers helped, but they still required strength and caution. A clean bed was not just a clean bed. It was water, fuel, weather, soap, time, and muscle gathered into softness. Drying depended on the sky, or on indoor arrangements that brought their own discomfort. A bright breezy day could feel like a blessing to the laundry. Lines filled with white cloth, yards and hedges turned into temporary landscapes of domestic victory. But rain could delay everything. Smoke could soil what had just been cleaned. Freezing weather could stiffen garments on the line. In cramped urban rooms, damp laundry might hang indoors, adding moisture to already crowded air. The smell of drying linen could be lovely, but the work behind it was enormous. Much of this labor fell to women, girls, servants, laundresses, enslaved people in some societies, and poor workers paid by the piece or by the day. Gender and class shaped the experience sharply. A gentleman might complain that his hot water was late without ever calculating the stairs between kitchen and bedroom. A middle-class woman might supervise servants who carried and scrubbed, while still feeling the burden of management. A poor woman might do her family's washing after paid work, or take in laundry for others, turning her own home into a place of steam and fatigue. A child might be old enough to carry a small pail before being old enough to understand that this was labor. Servants in larger houses often made running water comfort appear before running water truly existed. They rose early to light fires, draw water, fill cans, carry pitchers to bedrooms, empty slops, clean basins, and prepare baths. The family upstairs experienced water as service. The servants downstairs experienced it as wait and time. This division is important, because many historical descriptions of comfort are written from the point of view of those who received it, not those who carried it. The same was true in hotels, boarding houses, schools, hospitals, and ships. Water might be delivered by staff in cans and jugs, rationed by routine, heated in central places, and distributed according to rank or need. In an inn, a traveler asking for warm water was asking for someone's journey through corridors and stairs. In a hospital ward, clean water had to be maintained despite constant demand. In a school, wash basins might be filled and emptied in rows, the discipline of washing shaped by bells and supervision. There were also professional water carriers in many towns and cities. Where household supplies were inadequate, people paid others to bring water from fountains, rivers, conduits, or pumps. In some places, water sellers moved through streets with barrels, skins, carts, or yokes. Their work reminds us that infrastructure can be human as well as mechanical. Before pipes, there were backs. Before pressure, there was footsteps. Rainwater collection offered another kind of dependence. A roof could become a catchment. Gutters directed water into barrels or cisterns. Rainwater was often prized for washing because it was soft, meaning it worked well with soap and left fewer mineral traces than hard well water. But stored rainwater needed care. Barrels could grow stale, collect debris, or freeze. Cisterns had to be cleaned and covered. A dry spell made every remaining inch more precious. The household watched the sky not only for crops and roads, but for laundry, drinking, and washing. Springs carried their own feeling. A spring might be shaded, mossy, enclosed by stone, or approached by a path worn by generations. Its water could be cold even in summer, a small luxury of the earth. People might set milk or butter nearby to keep cool, or pause there during work. In some places springs were associated with saints, healers, memories, or local stories. Practical water and imagined water were not always separate. A clear source could become a place of gratitude. Rivers and streams could serve many needs, but they were not simple blessings. They provided water, washing places, transport, power, fish, and beauty. They also carried waste from upstream, flooded in season, froze in winter, and required caution. Clothes washed at a river had to be carried there and back. Kneeling at the bank or standing in shallows was hard on the body. A stream that looked picturesque in a painting could be a cold workplace for hands and knees. Pumps changed the feel of water without removing labor. A pump in a yard or street could be more convenient than hauling from an open well, and safer if properly maintained. The handle gave a satisfying rhythm: lift, press, then the cough and rush from the spout. Children might love the drama of the first gush. Adults knew the priming, the repairs, the freezing, the squeak of metal needing attention. A pump brought water upward, but it did not carry it indoors, heat it, use it, or take it away. And departure mattered as much as arrival. Running water is not only about what comes in. It is about what leaves. Used water had to go somewhere. The basin after washing, the tub after laundry, the pot after cooking, the rinse water from dishes, the gray water from scrubbing floors, the chamber pot from the night, all required management. Modern drains make disappearance feel natural. Older households knew that nothing simply disappeared. Wastewater might be thrown into a yard, poured into a gutter, carried to a drain, emptied into a privy, used on a garden when appropriate, or disposed of according to local rules. In some towns, regulations tried to control when and where slops could be thrown. In practice, habits varied, and crowded urban life made waste a constant problem. Rural households had more space, but still had to manage smell, mud, animals, wells, and the risk of contaminating the very water they needed. Chamber pots belong to this story because they show the other side of plumbing. Before indoor flush toilets became common, night needs were handled in the room or nearby, especially in cold weather or where privies stood outside. Pots had to be emptied and cleaned. In larger houses, servants did this. In poorer homes, family members did. In cities, the removal of human waste could involve cesspits, night soil collectors, drains, rivers, or unfortunate neglect. It is not necessary to dwell on the unpleasantness to understand the central point. Modern plumbing removed repeated carrying in both directions, and that changed domestic life profoundly. Even a simple floor washing required planning. One did not open a tap and fill a mop bucket under a sink. Water was brought in, perhaps warmed, mixed with soap, sand, soda, or other cleaning agents, used across boards or stone, then carried away darkened with dirt. Scrubbing steps, dairies, sculleries, and thresholds could be routine labor. Cleanliness in the house depended on controlled wetness, enough water to lift dirt, not so much that would warped, floors stayed damp, or precious supply was wasted. Dishes, too, were different without a sink supplied by hot running water. A dishpan might be set on a table or in a scullery. Greasy plates benefited from hot water, which meant fuel. Fine china needed gentleness. Cooking pots needed soaking or scraping. Rinse water had to be provided. The dishwater, once gray and cooling, had to be carried out. A kitchen sink, where one existed before full plumbing, might drain somewhere but still need water carried to it. The modern pairing of tap and drain was a gradual achievement, not a single invention dropped into every home at once. Architecture changed as water changed. Without indoor plumbing, household tasks spread through many spaces. The yard, well, pump, kitchen, scullery, washhouse, dairy, bedroom, privy, and garden all shared the water story. With piped water and drains, certain functions gathered into specialized rooms, bathrooms, lavatories, laundry rooms, kitchens designed around sinks. Walls began to hide pipes. Floors were built to receive tubs and basins. Privacy changed. Morning routines changed. The geography of the house became more compact and more convenient. But the transition could be awkward. Early indoor plumbing was expensive, sometimes unreliable, and sometimes mistrusted. Pipes froze. Drains smelled if poorly trapped. Water pressure varied. Cisterns and tanks needed maintenance. Some people feared that baths or indoor closets might bring dampness, sewer gas, or moral softness. Others embraced them as signs of health and respectability. Advertisements for modern bathrooms often sold not only hygiene but ease, status, brightness, and a new kind of private comfort. For many families, the first indoor tap did not mean instant luxury. It might be cold water only. It might be in the kitchen, shared by several households, or in a yard. Hot water might still depend on a kettle or boiler. A bathtub might be used for storage when not in use, or a portable tin bath might be brought near the fire on Saturday night. The old habits remained alongside the new conveniences. People who had spent years carrying water did not necessarily waste at the moment a tap appeared. Memory can be a kind of measuring cup. The phrase Saturday night bath evokes one common pattern in some modernizing households, though it was never universal. A tub set near the kitchen fire, water heated in kettles, children washed in order, perhaps clean nightclothes warmed nearby. The scene can be remembered with affection, but it also shows limits: shared water, careful timing, a tub to empty, a floor to dry, a mother or older sibling managing the process. The coziness was real. So was the work. Water also shaped sleep. A person preparing for bed might not have a bathroom steps away. There might be a pitcher and basin, a chamber pot, perhaps a covered jug for drinking, perhaps nothing if the household was too poor or crowded. In winter, no one wished to walk outside unnecessarily. A little water upstairs could be a mercy. Warm water for cold feet could feel almost luxurious. A hot brick or warming pan might heat the bed, but a basin of warm water could soften the body before sleep. Imagine an evening in a small house. The last light is fading. The day's water has already passed through many uses. Some was boiled with potatoes. Some washed a child's face. Some rinsed a cloth. Some went to the hens or the pig. A kettle sits near the fire with enough left for a final cup and perhaps a small wash. The pitcher on the stand is not full, so the person using it pours slowly. The basin is cool under the hands. A towel, not perfectly soft but clean enough, waits over the rail. Outside, the pump is dark. There is a tenderness in this restraint. When water is carried, people know its measure. They may reuse it when appropriate, clean rinse water for a less delicate task, cooled kettle water for plants, wash water for scrubbing a step. They may save the best water for drinking and cooking. They may put covers over jugs to keep out dust. They may warn children not to spill. Such thrift can look severe from a modern distance, but it is also a form of attention. At the same time, we should not romanticize scarcity. Carrying water was tiring. Limited water could mean fewer chances to wash, more strain during illness, more conflict in crowded housing, more danger when sources were contaminated, and more work for those already burdened. A woman recovering from childbirth, an elderly person, a disabled person, or a family in a fifth-floor room felt the absence of running water differently from a healthy adult beside a clear spring. Cozy history should be honest enough to see the ache beneath the candlelight. Urban life made the question especially complicated. Cities concentrated people before they always had the pipes, sewers, and public health systems to support them safely. Shared pumps could become crowded. Wells could be contaminated by nearby privies or industry. Rivers that supplied water might also receive waste. Water cellars might be expensive. Tenement dwellers might climb stairs with pails, rationing every drop. Reformers in the 19th century often argued for better water not because it was fashionable, but because it was urgently connected to health, dignity, and survival. In wealthier urban homes, meanwhile, the move toward indoor plumbing became part of a larger transformation of domestic comfort. Bathrooms with porcelain fixtures, tiled surfaces, nickel taps, and reliable drains seemed bright, clean, and modern. Yet even there, the new systems depended on municipal works beyond the house, reservoirs, pumping stations, filtration, mains, sewers, engineers, laborers, taxes, and regulations. A private bath was connected to a public world. That is another hidden lesson of running water. It did not simply move labor from the household into nowhere. It moved much of it into infrastructure. Instead of one person carrying a bucket, many people built and maintained networks. Instead of watching the well, communities watched reservoirs and treatment plants. The daily burden became less visible inside the home, but water remained a collective achievement. The tap is quiet because many systems are speaking for it. Before those systems, households developed rituals around enough. Enough for morning. Enough for supper. Enough for washing the baby. Enough for laundry if the rain holds off. Enough for the cow. Enough to get through a freeze. Enough clean water set aside in case someone is ill in the night. These calculations gave water a moral and emotional presence. To bring someone water was care. To waste it was thoughtless. To keep it clean was responsibility. There were small luxuries, too. A bowl of warm water for aching hands. A clean cloth laid over a pitcher. A jug cooling in a shaded pantry. Rainwater saved for washing hair because it left it softer. A copper kettle polished bright. A basin with a painted rim. A pump that never failed in summer. A bath taken after harvest, or before a wedding, or after a long journey. Comfort did not have to be abundant to be deeply felt. In some memories, the old pump stands at the center of childhood. Children ran to it barefoot, took turns working the handle, drank from a tin dipper, splashed one another when adults were not looking. The water tasted of metal, stone, depth, or cold earth. Adults remembered the same pump differently, the frozen mornings, the repairs, the worry during drought, the endless pails. Both memories can be true. A source can be beloved and burdensome at the same time. Class differences entered even the bedroom. In a comfortable house, a servant might leave hot water outside the door at a set hour. The occupant woke to a basin ready, perhaps with towels warmed and a shaving mug prepared. In a modest household, each person might take turns at one basin in the kitchen. In a crowded lodging, privacy might be scarce and water shared among strangers. In an institution, washing might happen by schedule. The idea of beginning the day freshly washed meant different things depending on how water reached the room. Gender shaped not only who carried water, but who was judged by its results. Women were often held responsible for clean children, clean linen, clean floors, clean cooking vessels, and a decent home, even when water access was poor. The standard could be unforgiving. A housewife, servant, laundress, or daughter might be praised for cleanliness that required great effort, or blamed for dirt that infrastructure made almost inevitable. Running water did not remove all domestic labor, but it altered the scale of what could reasonably be expected. Age mattered as well. Children fetched small amounts, learned routes, watched younger siblings near wells and streams, and absorbed household rules. Older people who had carried water all their lives might feel both relief and strangeness when a tap arrived indoors. The body remembers repeated tasks. The shoulder remembers the yoke. The hand remembers the pump handle. Convenience can feel like grace, but also like the end of a familiar rhythm. If we listen closely, the before running water household is full of pauses. Waiting for the kettle. Waiting for the tub to fill by bucketfuls. Waiting for wash water to heat. Waiting for laundry to dry. Waiting for rain. Waiting for the pump to thaw. Modern plumbing compresses these pauses. It makes water immediate, and immediacy changes thought. We plan less around it because it plans itself for us. Yet the older pace had its own forms of mindfulness, not because hardship is noble in itself, but because dependence makes things noticeable. The first clear draw from a repaired well. The relief of a full rain barrel. The pleasure of a warm basin at bedtime. The blessing of a spring that runs through drought. The satisfaction of folded linen after a successful drying day. These were not small matters. They were the texture of domestic peace. So tonight, when we imagine life before running water, let us place ourselves gently in the doorway of an older house. The floor is worn where many feet have crossed. Near the wall sits a bucket with a wooden handle darkened by use. A jug stands covered with a cloth. The kettle murmurs near the fire. Upstairs, a basin waits in a room where the bed has been turned down. None of these objects is dramatic. They are ordinary. But they hold the history of care. Someone has thought ahead. Someone filled the jug before night fell. Someone kept the well covered. Someone saved dry kindling so water could be warmed in the morning. Someone rinsed the cloth and hung it near the hearth. Someone carried away what was used. The room feels simple, but it is supported by movements that began long before the sleeper arrived. Running water, when it became common, changed hygiene, architecture, illness care, cooking, laundry, privacy, and the emotional shape of the day. It softened mornings and evenings. It shortened tasks that had once consumed hours. It made cleanliness easier to maintain and easier to expect. It gave many people a kind of independence inside their own homes, especially those who had cared for others. But before that, water was intimate because it was limited. It was close to the hand, close to the back, close to the fire, close to the weather. People knew whether it was cold from the ground or soft from rain, whether the bucket was nearly empty, whether the kettle held enough for one more cup. They noticed the sound of pouring because pouring meant using what had been brought. As we leave this segment, hear the slow sound of a bucket set down on stone. Hear the dipper touch the surface. Hear the pump handle settle after its last stroke. Hear the kettle begin its low conversation with the fire. Running water has not arrived yet, but care has. In older homes, care often looked like carrying something heavy so that someone else could rest. The comforts in our title did not arrive all at once. Electric light, warm beds, and running water did not enter ordinary homes like a curtain rising on a stage. They came gradually, unevenly, and sometimes stubbornly, by street, by village, by income, by landlord, by local government, by weather, by war, by fashion, and by the quiet patience of people who saved money for one improvement at a time. A house might have a gas lamp in the parlor while the bedrooms remained cold and dim. A town might have public water pipes while many families still carried from a yard pump. A farmhouse might own a better mattress long before it had electricity. A city apartment might have electric light before it had a private bathroom. Modern comfort is not a single invention. It is a long, slow rearrangement of daily life. This is important to remember because we often speak about the past in broad steps: before electricity, after electricity, before plumbing, after plumbing, before central heating, after central heating. Real households were rarely so tidy. They lived through overlaps. A grandmother who had trimmed lamps in childhood might later switch on an electric bulb in old age. A child might grow up in a house with a radio and still wash at a basin. A worker in an electrified factory might return at night to a cold room with a shared tap in the hallway. Progress was not one road moving at the same speed for everyone. It was more like lamplight spreading through a town, bright in one window, faint in another, absent down the lane. Gaslight was one of the first great changes in the modern evening, especially in towns and cities during the 19th century. Before electric lighting became common, gas could brighten streets, shops, theaters, factories, and better-off homes. It made a different kind of night. A gas-lit street was not the same as a moonlit or lantern-lit street. It had fixed points of brightness, repeated down the pavement. Shop windows could glow after dusk. Public buildings could hold evening meetings. Domestic rooms with gas fixtures had a steadier and stronger light than candles or many older lamps, at least when the system worked well. But gaslight was not effortless. It required pipes, works, maintenance, payment, and confidence in a new infrastructure. Gas could smell. It could soot ceilings. It could leak. It could make rooms warmer and sometimes less pleasant if ventilation was poor. The flame still had to be managed. Mantles, fittings, taps, and habits had to be learned. A person entering the gaslit age did not simply receive brightness from nowhere. The house became attached to a larger network: coal, gasworks, pipes under streets, meter readings, bills, and municipal decisions. Electric light, when it spread, seemed almost magical by comparison. A bulb had no visible flame. It did not need trimming. It did not drip wax. It did not require a match at the point of use. With a switch, a room could leap into clarity. Corners that had been uncertain became readable. A staircase became safer. A needle, key, book, or child's face could be found at once. The feeling must have been remarkable for those who remembered flame as the normal companion of darkness. Yet early electric light was also uneven. The first systems served limited districts, wealthy clients, businesses, hotels, railway stations, theaters, and public spaces before they served every cottage and tenement. Some households had only a few wired rooms. Some had a single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. Some had electricity for light before they had electric appliances. In many rural places, especially far from power lines, electricity came much later than it did in cities. In parts of the United States, rural electrification in the 20th century changed farm life within living memory. In many other countries, villages waited still longer, and in some places reliable electricity remains a modern hope rather than a settled fact. A brighter evening changed the household in delicate ways. Reading after dark became easier. Sewing could continue with less strain. A child could do schoolwork at a table without leaning dangerously close to a lamp. A mother could see a feverish face more clearly. A person could descend stairs without carrying a candle. The room became less dependent on the hearth, less arranged around flame. Furniture could move. Corners became useful. The evening widened. But comfort often arrives with new expectations. The same light that made leisure possible also made work easier to extend. Shops could remain open later. Offices could demand longer hours. Factories could run shifts deep into the night. Domestic tasks that once waited for daylight could now be finished in the evening. A light bulb gives rest, but it can also ask you to keep going. This is one of the quiet lessons of modern comfort. A convenience may soften life, and at the same time stretch the boundaries of labor. For sleep, artificial light changed the descent into night. Older evenings often faded in stages. Daylight thinned, the hearth glowed, one lamp was lit, then perhaps another, then the flame was lowered, the wick trimmed, the candle pinched out, and darkness gathered naturally around the bed. With electric light, night could be delayed. A room could remain bright until the exact moment someone chose darkness. This was useful, safe, and welcome. It also changed the body's conversation with dusk. The old authority of sunset weakened. The day no longer ended because the sky ended. While light was changing, warmth was changing too. The warm bed of the modern imagination is not only a mattress and blankets. It is a whole system, a dry room, a roof that keeps out damp, a stove or furnace or radiator, affordable fuel, glass windows, insulation, factory-made textiles, transport networks, and the expectation that sleeping should be comfortable rather than merely endured. Before these things became common, going to bed in winter could mean entering a cold chamber, touching cold sheets, and waiting for the body to make its own small climate under the covers. Older beds could be ingenious. People used curtains, testers, enclosed bedsteads, thick hangings, straw mattresses, feather beds, wool blankets, quilts, coverlets, nightcaps, bed warmers, and hot bricks or bottles wrapped in cloth. A bed could be a carefully made nest. Curtains around a bed were not only decorative, they could reduce drafts and hold warmth. A feather bed could be wonderfully soft if one could afford it and keep it clean. Straw or chaff could be practical and renewable, though it needed attention. Wool blankets kept generations alive in cold rooms. The point is not that people lacked skill. The point is that warmth had to be assembled. Mattresses changed slowly through materials, manufacturing, and trade. Straw, hay, chaff, wool, hair, moss, cotton, feathers, and later springs and foams all tell parts of the story. The rise of standardized bed sizes, metal bed frames, coil springs, cotton ticking, mass-produced sheets, and later modern mattresses changed the feel of sleep. Metal bed frames could help with cleanliness and were less hospitable to some pests than older wooden constructions, though no single object solved every problem. Springs altered support. Industrial textiles made bedding more widely available. Department stores and catalogs helped turn the bed into a purchasable package rather than a local assemblage of frame, stuffing, sheets, and covers. Heating changed the meaning of the bedroom. In many older houses, the kitchen or main room held the reliable fire. Bedrooms might be unheated or only lightly warmed. A person leaving the hearth for bed carried warmth on the skin and hoped to keep it. A warming pan, passed between sheets, gave temporary comfort. A hot water bottle could be a small blessing. But if the room itself remained cold, the first minutes in bed could be a negotiation with cloth, breath, and patience. Stoves, improved fireplaces, coal grates, tiled stoves, cast iron ranges, steam heat, hot water radiators, gas heaters, electric heaters, and central heating all altered this relationship. None appeared everywhere at once. Some brought new dangers or inconveniences: smoke, fumes, uneven heat, dust, maintenance, fire risk, and fuel costs. Still, they widened the possibility of warmth. A heated bedroom was not merely a luxury of comfort. It made dressing easier, nursing easier, recovery from illness easier, caring for infants easier, and waking in the dark months less severe. Central heating, where it became available, moved comfort from the hearth into the building itself. Heat no longer belonged only to the room with the fire. Pipes, ducts, radiators, boilers, furnaces, and later thermostats distributed warmth through hidden paths. The household no longer had to gather around one flame in quite the same way. This changed architecture and family habits. Rooms could be used differently. Privacy became more comfortable. A child could sleep in a separate room without the same level of cold. An older person could sit away from the kitchen. The house became less a cluster around fire and more an evenly tempered interior world. But even here, the story is uneven. A wealthy urban home might enjoy central heating while poorer neighbors bought coal by the small sack. A middle-class apartment might have radiators controlled by a landlord, warm at odd hours and cold at others. A rural household might depend on wood long after nearby towns used gas or electricity. Some people lived in rooms where heat was technically available but too expensive to use freely. Comfort is not only invention. It is access, price, maintenance, and control. Running water brought perhaps the deepest rearrangement of household labor. A tap is a small object, but it changes everything around it. It changes where washing happens, how often it happens, who carries, who waits, who plans, and who is tired at the end of the day. Before piped water, water had to be fetched, pumped, stored, heated, poured, used, and removed. After piped water, at least in households that had it reliably, much of this labor disappeared into walls and drains. The first stages were often partial. A public pump might serve a street. A yard tap might serve a house. A shared tap might stand in a hallway or courtyard. A kitchen sink might arrive before an upstairs bathroom. Cold water might come before hot. A drain might be added before a flush toilet. A bathtub might be present but used only with carried or heated water. A household could be modern in one corner and old-fashioned in another. Indoor plumbing depended on more than the desire for convenience. It required water supply, pressure, pipes, drains, sewage systems, legal standards, skilled labor, materials, and money. Cities had to build and maintain reservoirs, mains, sewers, pumping stations, and treatment systems. The private bathroom is therefore not truly private in its history. It rests on public works. Behind a quiet sink lies a whole civic landscape: engineers, diggers, bricklayers, inspectors, ratepayers, plumbers, and the politics of clean water. Bathrooms changed privacy. In older houses, washing might happen in bedrooms, kitchens, washhouses, yards, bathhouses, or public facilities. Chamber pots, privies, and shared arrangements were ordinary in many places. With the bathroom, several functions gathered into one room: washing, bathing, waste removal, mirrors, towels, hot water, sometimes laundry. The body received a new kind of domestic space. Privacy, hygiene, convenience, and modesty were rearranged by plumbing. Hot water on demand was another slow miracle. Cold running water already saved carrying. Hot running water saved fuel management, timing, lifting, pouring, and waiting. It made baths easier, washing up easier, shaving easier, cleaning easier, and care work easier. A sick person could be washed with less disruption. A baby could be bathed without quite so much planning. Dishes could be cleaned more readily. Hands could be warmed under the tap in winter. These are not dramatic scenes, but they are exactly where comfort lives. Laundry changed again when water systems met machines. Earlier laundry was among the heaviest household labors: soaking, boiling, rubbing, rinsing, wringing, bluing, starching, drying, ironing. Running water helped, but washing machines, wringers, gas or electric boilers, detergents, indoor drying, and later automatic machines transformed the scale of the task. Clean sheets became less rare. Clothes could be washed more often. But the work did not vanish equally. Machines cost money. Someone still sorted, loaded, hung, folded, mended, and paid the bill. In many homes, modern appliances reduced labor without removing responsibility, and that responsibility still often fell along gendered lines. The arrival of bathrooms and better laundry also changed the bed. A clean body entering clean sheets in a warm room is a modern chain of comforts. Each link depends on infrastructure: water, heat, soap, textiles, manufacturing, time, and domestic organization. When we say a bed is comfortable, we are sometimes describing not only its softness, but the hidden labor that makes it dry, clean, warm, and ready. Class shaped every part of this transition. Wealthy households often received comforts earlier, but not always in the way we might imagine. A rich person could enjoy light, warmth, water, and clean linens because servants supplied labor before machines supplied convenience. The bedroom might feel comfortable because someone else rose early to carry coal, black the grate, heat water, empty waste, air bedding, beat carpets, and tend lamps. In such a house, modern conveniences sometimes reduced servants' work, sometimes they changed its form, sometimes they allowed employers to expect more cleanliness, more polish, more constant readiness. For poorer households, new infrastructure could be liberating but difficult to obtain. A shared tap was better than a distant pump, but still meant waiting and carrying. A gas meter required coins or bills. Electric wiring required a landlord's investment. A private bathroom might remain out of reach for decades. Tenements and crowded housing often held many families between old habits and new expectations. Reformers might write about sanitation, but residents lived the daily reality: stairs, buckets, shared privies, damp walls, cold rooms, and the cost of fuel. Urban and rural timelines differed sharply. Cities often received gas, sewers, piped water, and electric networks earlier because dense populations made infrastructure economically and politically feasible. But cities also concentrated poverty, pollution, overcrowding, and disease. Rural households might have cleaner air, more space, and direct access to fuel or wells, yet wait longer for electricity, plumbing, and reliable heating systems. A farm family might be rich in land and skill while poor in conveniences. A city clerk might have a gas-lit street and still rent one cold room. Geography mattered. A wet climate, a cold climate, a dry climate, a mountainous village, an island, a desert town, a coal region, a forested region, a colonized region, or a rapidly industrializing city each produced different comforts and shortages. In some places, water was near but unsafe. In others, it was clean but far. In some, fuel was abundant but smoky. In others, warmth was expensive. The history of comfort is always local when you look closely. Time mattered too. The late 19th and early 20th centuries brought many visible changes in Europe and North America, but their spread was not complete, and similar transitions occurred differently elsewhere. Wars interrupted building and redirected materials. Economic depressions delayed household improvements. Colonial systems often extracted resources while denying modern infrastructure to the people who produced wealth. Migration brought families from one comfort timeline into another. A person might leave a village without electricity and arrive in a city of neon signs, or leave a city apartment for a rural house with a pump in the yard. Advertisements helped teach people what comfort should mean. Catalogs, magazines, shop windows, exhibitions, and later radio and television presented the modern home as bright, clean, warm, efficient, and private. A bathroom became a sign of decency. A white enamel sink suggested hygiene. A glowing lamp suggested refinement. A spring mattress promised healthful sleep. A vacuum cleaner promised freedom from dust. These messages were not neutral. They shaped desire, class aspiration, and shame. They could make older households feel backward even when they were careful, skilled, and clean within their means. Modern comfort also changed the senses. Electric light reduced the smell of lamps and candles. Central heating changed the smell of winter rooms, taking away some smoke and soot while adding the dry scent of radiators, dust, or warm pipes. Plumbing reduced the presence of waste in living spaces. Laundered textiles smelled different as soaps, detergents, and drying methods changed. Mattresses and pillows changed the feel of rest. A modern night became brighter, warmer, cleaner, and quieter in some ways, though not always more restful. Noise entered with comfort too. Pipes knock. Radiators hiss. Furnaces rumble. Water heaters click. Electric lights may hum faintly. Refrigerators cycle on in the kitchen. Pumps start and stop. A house with modern systems has its own sleeping soundtrack. It is easy not to hear it because it is the sound of things working on our behalf. Older houses had different night sounds, wind at shutters, embers settling, animals shifting, a drip in a basin, footsteps to the pump or privy, the creak of bed ropes or boards. Every comfort has an acoustics. There is a moral caution in this history. It is tempting to tell the story as a simple triumph, darkness defeated, cold defeated, dirt defeated. In many ways, these changes truly improved life. Clean water saved lives. Sanitation reduced disease. Safer lighting reduced some fire risks. Warm rooms protected the vulnerable. Better bedding eased bodies worn by labor. These are not small gains. A child surviving because of clean water, an older person sleeping through a cold night, a tired worker washing in privacy, these are profound human goods. But triumph is not the whole story. Some comforts increased energy use. Some depended on coal smoke, industrial pollution, dangerous labor, extraction, and unequal systems. Some made employers expect longer working hours. Some made domestic standards more demanding. Some created bills that pressed on poor households. Some arrived in wealthy districts while poorer communities waited. Comfort can be both blessing and burden, both relief and obligation. Still, for a sleepy history, we can hold the complexity gently. We do not need to scold the bedside lamp for existing. We can simply notice its lineage. We can see the rushlight behind it, the candle, the oil lamp, the gas mantle, the early bulb, the power station, the worker on the line, the bill paid at the end of the month. A lamp is not just a lamp. It is a social agreement that someone, somewhere, has made darkness easier for you. We can do the same with the bed. Behind a modern mattress are fields of cotton, flocks of sheep, forests, factories, springs, foam, delivery trucks, laundries, seamstresses, machinists, chemists, and shopkeepers. Behind clean sheets are water systems, detergents, washing machines, dryers or clotheslines, and hands that make the bed. Behind warmth are fuel, wires, pipes, thermostats, repair visits, and the long dream of waking without dread of cold floors. And we can do the same with water. A glass beside the bed looks simple. It may be the simplest comfort in the room. Yet behind it are watersheds, reservoirs, wells, pumps, filtration, pipes, valves, plumbers, public health rules, and constant maintenance. In older households, that glass might have represented a trip to the well, a careful covering of a jug, a child's request answered before sleep. Now it may stand there almost unnoticed, clear and obedient. History asks us to notice. The slow arrival of comfort also changed time. Carrying water took time. Trimming lamps took time. Making fires took time. Airing bedding took time. Heating a bath took time. Emptying pots took time. When machines and networks absorbed these tasks, hours shifted. Some people gained leisure. Some took paid work. Some raised standards and filled the saved time with new chores. Some simply became less exhausted. Time saved is not always time freed, but sometimes it is. Sometimes it is the difference between collapsing into bed and reading one page by a clean light. It changed childhood. A child in a modern heated room can take for granted things that once required adult vigilance. Warmth at night, light on the stairs, water at the sink, a bath before bed, clean pajamas, a mattress not shared with too many bodies, these are part of a child's sense of safety. In older households, children also knew care, laughter, stories, and tenderness, but the material conditions of care were different. A parent might show love by warming a brick, saving a candle and carrying water, or giving the warmest place to the smallest body. It changed old age. For an elderly person, the distance to water, the cold of a bedroom, the danger of stairs in darkness, and the effort of tending a fire could become serious burdens. Modern systems did not remove all hardship, but they could make independence last longer. A switch by the bed, a tap within reach, a heated room, and a bathroom indoors are not merely conveniences. They are supports for frail bodies. It changed illness. A sick room before modern comfort required careful management, heat kept steady, water brought often, linens changed with effort, chamber pots emptied, lamps watched, air balanced between freshness and draft. With plumbing, heating, washable bedding, and reliable light, care became easier in many respects. Not easy, but easier. Medicine often receives the main attention in histories of health, and rightly so, but pipes, sheets, light, and warmth also nursed the body. It changed privacy and dignity. A person who can wash behind a closed door, use a toilet indoors, sleep in a clean bed, and control a bedside light has a kind of ordinary dignity that history has not always granted. Privacy used to be expensive, crowded, negotiated, or unavailable for many people. The modern home did not solve every inequality, but it created new expectations about bodily privacy. Those expectations are now so familiar that their absence feels startling. Yet millions of people, in the past and present, have lived between expectation and reality. This is why the story should not end with congratulations to modernity. Reliable electricity, safe water, adequate heating, and decent bedding are still unevenly distributed across the world. Even in wealthy countries, some households choose between heat and other necessities. Some renters live with poor plumbing, damp rooms, or unsafe wiring. Some communities face contaminated water or failing infrastructure. The history of comfort continues, and its central question remains the same: who receives ease, and who supplies the labor or bears the cost? As we close this episode, it may help to imagine one house changing over generations. At first, evening gathers around a hearth. Water comes from outside. The bed is layered against cold. The night is dark beyond one small flame. Then perhaps a better lamp appears. Then a stove. Then a pump nearer the door. Then gaslight in the street. Then a metal bed frame, a bought mattress, a warmer blanket. Then a pipe reaches the kitchen. Then a drain. Then electricity in one room. Then a bathroom, perhaps small and cold at first, but private. Then hot water. Then radiators. Then a washing machine. No single day contains the whole revolution. But after enough such days, the house has become a different world. The people living through these changes may not have spoken of history. They may have spoken of saving, installing, repairing, complaining, adapting, and getting used to things. The first electric bill. The plumber's visit. The coal delivery. The new tap that sputtered before it ran clear. The mattress carried upstairs. The radiator that clanged in the night. The bathroom that smelled of new paint and soap. The child told not to waste water. The elder who still turned off every light from old habit. These are the textures of transition. There is tenderness in that old habit of not wasting. People who had known scarcity often treated comfort carefully. They turned lights off. They saved warm water. They aired blankets in good weather. They kept a kettle ready. They understood that ease could vanish if fuel ran out, pipes froze, wages failed, or illness came. Modern abundance can make us forget the discipline that comfort once required. But the memory remains in gestures, folding a blanket at the foot of the bed, filling a glass before sleep, checking that the door is shut against a draft. For our sleepy purposes, the lesson is not to prefer hardship. It is not noble to be cold, thirsty, overworked, or left in darkness. The lesson is to notice the quiet architectures that hold us. A switch, a tap, a mattress, a blanket, a drain, a heater, a clean towel, these are humble things, but each one stands at the end of a long human effort to make the night less difficult. So if you are listening from a room with electric light, let it be soft in your mind. If you are near running water, imagine for a moment the bucket set down on stone, the pump handle lifted, the pitcher filled. If your bed is warm, imagine the hands that once tucked straw, shook feathers, laid wool, warmed pans, and guarded embers. Not to make the present feel guilty, but to make it feel full. History is often told through crowns, battles, machines, and laws. But it is also told through the moment when a person no longer has to carry water upstairs in the dark. Through the moment when a child can read without smoke in the eyes. Through the moment when an old woman can wash in a basin of warm water without waiting for someone to fetch it from the yard. Through the moment when a tired worker enters a room that is already lit and already warm. These moments are small only if we measure history from too far away. Up close, they are enormous. They change the shoulders, the skin, the breath, the schedule, the mood of evening, the dignity of the body, and the ease with which sleep can come. And now, as the episode settles, we can let the modern room become gentle rather than ordinary. The light may be low. The pipes may be quiet. The bed may be waiting. Somewhere behind these comforts are centuries of careful hands, trimming wicks, carrying buckets, banking fires, sewing quilts, digging mains, laying wires, fitting valves, washing sheets, and turning houses slowly toward ease. The night outside is still the night. Darkness still comes to the window. Cold still exists beyond the wall. Water still has weight, even when pipes carry it for us. But inside, for many of us, the old labors have been folded into systems so familiar that they feel like silence. We rest inside that silence. So take one last unhurried breath with this thought: comfort is history made soft. It is not perfect, and it is not shared equally enough, but where it exists, it holds the memory of work. A lamp remembers flame. A tap remembers the well. A radiator remembers the hearth. A mattress remembers straw, wool, feathers, and patient making. And a warm bed, waiting at the end of the day, remembers all the people who tried, in their own time and with their own tools, to make the dark a little kinder.